Hello internet users and welcome back to another video. Once again, we're going to be putting a Pokemon save file into a pretty ridiculous state. Generation 3 is probably one of my favorites when it comes to softlocks. There are so many things about these games that just so happen to let you ruin them in the most creative ways. Even when you think you may have seen it all, when there are so many different Pokemon items and abilities, there are still new twisted setups that you can make happen if you're evil enough. So for today, we'll be returning to the Hoenn region to do exactly that. No further introduction required. Here's how you can take a game of Pokemon Emerald and make it almost unplayable. For this particular video, you're first going to need a level 99 Larvitar on a completed save file that has access to both the SS title and Pacifilog Town. However, the key items that have been obtained in this playthrough are important. In order for the setup to work, you need to ensure these three things. Number 1, do not get the Whalmer Pail. This is an optional item obtained at the flower shop outside of Rustboro. It's pretty easy to avoid getting, and I think that most people don't bother with it anyway. Number 2, get the old rod, but none of the other fishing rods. At Dewford, you can speak with a fisherman to receive the old rod. This is the weakest fishing rod in the game, and you want to make sure that you only have this one and not the good or super rod. Number 3, do not get the HM for Rock Smash. This last one might confuse you, as Rock Smash is not meant to be an optional item. The player needs to be able to smash rocks in order to progress through the game. However, technically, only the move is required, not the HM. If the player takes the time to do so during their playthrough, they can trade a Pokemon with Rock Smash to this game, so that they can use the move without ever obtaining the HM. Making sure that your key items are set up this way is important, because in Gen 3, it is not possible to get rid of them later. This is also the first gen where it stops letting you store them in the PC as well. And outside of key items, there is another important thing you need to do on this save file. Make sure you head to Route 120, go to this spot, and defeat the invisible Kecleon on this tile. So now that you have your oddly specific completed game, I'm going to show you what to do next with it. At this point, I only have 4 Pokemon on this save. Blaziken the starter, a Wingull and Zigzagoon, who are my only remaining HM users, and a level 99 Larvitar. Take the Larvitar to the move deleter and make it so that its only move is Hyper Beam, with 5 PP. Next, toss away all of your items, all except for a single Lepaberry. This should be the only non-key item in your inventory. Now with your 4 Pokemon, head to Pacifilog Town and use the Pokemon Center here. After doing this, head all the way back to the daycare near Mauville. As I've shown in previous videos, trying to release your last remaining HM user doesn't work in this game. If you try, the Pokemon will just return with a message saying that it was worried about you. This feature exists to stop the player from accidentally trapping themselves in an unplayable game state. But luckily for us, another way to cut off access to HM users is to just put them into the daycare. This is why all of your HM moves need to be shared between 2 Pokemon. Once they are gone, head over to the PC here and release all other remaining Pokemon, aside from the Larvitar. When this is done, we're going to head to Route 120 again. Ordinarily, you would need Surf or Fly to get here from Mauville, but if you walk back to Slateport, you can take the ferry to Lily Cove. From here, you just have to go a little bit to the west to reach the route. For this next step, you might have to save and reload a few times. We're going to be doing some encounters, but need to make sure they go in a way where Larvitar gains no experience points. We need to get Hyper Beam down to 0 PP, so we'll need it to miss in battle 5 times. As well, we have to find a Wild Oddish, and have it use Poison Powder on Larvitar. Make sure to run away from the battle once this is accomplished. Now that Larvitar is poisoned, head over to this area here. We're going to walk back and forth for a while, taking poison damage until Larvitar is at 1 HP, and is exactly 1 step away from fainting. Remember that you take poison damage in the overworld every 4 steps, so during the final cycle, make sure that your 3rd step stops you on this specific tile right here. Many of these steps probably looked entirely random, but everything we just did here has made the game nearly unplayable. So let's take a closer look and see exactly why that is. As mentioned before, we are now literally 1 step away from having Larvitar faint from poison. Because Larvitar was our only Pokemon, this will send us back to the last Pokemon Center that was used, and in this case, it was the one in Pacifilog. Because we no longer have access to our HM users, it becomes impossible for the player to leave the town. The only way to get out of here is to either use Surf or Fly. Some of you might be thinking, why not just catch a new Pokemon to teach Surf? Well, there is actually no Pokemart in this town, so it's impossible to buy any Pokeballs to catch anything else. In addition to that, Larvitar remains our only Pokemon. I've mentioned this in several videos now, but in Gen 3, you cannot trade with another game unless you own at least 2. So once the player ends up in Pacifilog Town, there is absolutely nothing they can do to leave. They will be stuck in a very small section of the game, unable to do anything, pretty much forced to start a new save. This is what will happen if the player takes a single step off of this tile in Route 120. The next question some of you might be asking is there a way to reset the 4-step counter for poison damage? This is also something I considered and looked into. You might assume that resetting the game and loading back in would give you 4 steps again, but this is not the case. However, interestingly enough, something that does reset the 4 steps is a wild Pokemon encounter. If you use the old rod on the lake in front of you, you cause an encounter to happen. After you immediately run from it, you will be able to take the 4 steps again instead of 1. Unfortunately though, this ultimately makes no difference, since after you move away from the lake, you will not be able to cause another encounter to continue moving. You'll just faint from poison damage anyway. Now that I've established why we can't ever move from here, the next question is obvious. How do you get out of this? Believe it or not, there is still something you can do. You see, there is a good reason that I picked a level 99 Larvitar. Because it can still gain a level, it's still possible for it to evolve into Pupitar. Why is Pupitar important? Well, it's because it has a little ability called Shed Skin. This ability allows the user to remove its status conditions like poison at the end of the turn, and even better, it does this before poison damage is applied for the turn. I think you can all tell where I'm going with this. If the player can level up and evolve Larvitar, then they will be able to move again and escape this situation, avoiding their save file becoming a worthless Pacifilog simulator. This brings us to the next question: how do you level up Larvitar? As shown before, we have the old rod, and there is a lake in front of us, so we still have wild encounters. But there is a tiny problem here. Larvitar no longer has any PP for its moves. If you try to attack in this state, you'll use Struggle, and then immediately faint from the recoil damage. You won't even gain experience, and then will be sent back to Pacifilog's Pokemon Center, which is pretty much game over in this situation. Sure, the old rod does work in this town, but once you're here, there is nothing to gain by evolving Larvitar anymore. You're stuck. And this brings us to the part where we talk about the one useful item we left in our inventory. The Leppa Berry. By using this berry, you can restore up to 10 PP to a single move. Obviously though, using it to restore Larvitar's 5 Hyper Beams isn't going to give us enough moves to reach level 100. So instead, we're going to need to do something else with this berry. We're going to plant it in the patch of soil to the right. In Gen 3, when you plant a Leppa Berry, it will grow into a plant that you can pick at least 2 more from. The amount of time it takes for a plant to grow varies between each berry in the game, but in the case of Leppa Berries, it will take 16 hours before it's done. The Leppa plant has the potential to give up to 3 berries per harvest, but in this specific situation, we will always get 2. This is the reason that I said not to pick up the Whalmer Pail, because watering the plant every few hours is what increases the amount of berries you can receive. But because we don't have the Whalmer Pail, we're always guaranteed to receive the minimum amount of 2 berries. And when we get those 2 berries, we can use one of them to replenish Larvitar's Hyper Beam, and then plant the other one to continue the cycle. As long as we keep planting and harvesting Leppa Berries like this, we can still gain experience points, although the process is obviously pretty slow. In case you're wondering, we don't have to worry about Larvitar fainting in battle. Although poison is supposed to damage it at the end of each turn, if we immediately go into battle, knock out the opponent with Hyper Beam right away, then the game will end the encounter without ever applying the damage. So despite having a single hit point left, we're safe as long as the first turn always ends with the opponent knocked out. So now that we have our method to gain experience, the final question is, how long would it take to level up Larvitar? To answer this, we need to go over a few bits of information. First off, at level 99, Larvitar requires 37,127 experience. And because we only have the old rod, the Pokemon that we can battle are Wild Magikarp and Goldeen. These two can both be found between levels 5 and 10. A level 10 Magikarp will give 2080 XP. A level 10 Goldeen, however, will give 158 EXP. Obviously, if we want the highest amount of experience possible, we'll only want to find and defeat level 10 Goldeen. This is also why we got rid of that one Kecleon earlier. It would have been possible to get just a little extra experience from it, but now we can't. Because we start with 0 PP for Hyper Beam, we have no choice but to wait 16 hours for a Lepa Berry to recharge it. And this is why I said not to pick up the HM for Rock Smash. Rock Smash is the only HM move in this game that Larvitar can learn. If you had it, you could teach it to them, and they would have a move that could recover the full 10 PP instead of the limited 5 on Hyper Beam. Anyways, assuming that the player would always use its Hyper Beams to gain the most experience possible, they would gain 790 experience points from beating 5 level 10 Goldeens every 16 hours. Now that we have all that sorted, let's brace ourselves as we learn just how long it'll be before Larvitar earns that 37,000. 16 hours into the cycle, you can get 790 EXP. 80 hours in, your total will be at 3,950 EXP. 160 hours in, it'll be 7,900 EXP. 320 hours in, you'll have 15,800 EXP. 640 hours in, it's at 31,600 EXP. And finally, 752 hours in, the total will have reached 37,130, which is exactly 3 points over what Larvitar requires. That's right, after over several hundred hours, you can finally evolve Larvitar into Pupitar, and then use its Shed Skin ability to rid itself of the poison status, allowing you to walk around freely again. And keep in mind, this is the minimum amount of time required. This is all under the assumption that the player will always return to the game every 16 hours on the dot. Amusingly, because of the difference with Pupitar's HP stat, after evolution it'll go from having 1 HP to a lot more. In my case it was 44. And this might be enough on its own to get you back to a Pokemon Center, but Shed Skin is still the consistent method of getting rid of poison immediately. Either way though, the fact remains that getting Larvitar to level 100 is the only way to escape this situation. From here, the rest of the game is accessible again and can be played normally. Like I usually say at the end of these videos, there is no way that anyone would ever make their game like this on purpose. But it's still amusing that it can happen in the first place. We didn't need to mess around with any game-breaking glitches, all we did was use intended mechanics in unintended ways. Instead of going on an adventure, our trainer has instead ended up on the worst camping trip of their life. They have to spend hundreds of hours feeding their Pokemon fish and berries until they can finally go home. My name is Picaspri, and thanks for watching. Hey, so welcome to the end of the video. If you're new to the channel, I've made quite a few more of these things over the years, along with all the other videos I've made. I'm also going to take the opportunity to mention the fact that I stream on Twitch. It's easiest to know when I'm doing that stuff if you check my Twitter. A lot of people keep asking me about it, and there is a link to that in the description. That's all the time I got. Goodbye.